So today, this is the second day of our Dharma discourse. First of all, I had missed saying this yesterday. This is a homage to the perfection of wisdom, the mother of all the Buddhas of the three times, past, present, and future, which is indescribable, ineffable, beyond conception. And the mantra of the Heart Sutra, Samgate Bodhi Swaha. This is a verse of salutation from Abhisamaya Alankara by Maitreya. Paying homage to the mother of the Shravakas and particular Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, and the Buddhas. And then the recitation of the verses of salutation from Master Nagarjuna's Mulla Madhyama Kakarika. So yesterday we did the general explanation of the Dharma, and today we are going to go through the text by Master Nagarjuna, a commentary on the awakening mind. I'll try to explain as much as I can. When I give this kind of Dharma discourse, I do not present myself as being the teacher sitting on a high throne, and when I give introductory teachings to Buddha Dharma, what I do is I consider this to be like having a class with you, and so like being in a. As I explained the text, and I also thought that we would do some question and answers. We will have a question and answer session because there are many interpreters. There shouldn't be any difficulty in translating. So bring your questions, ask me your questions, so that this would be like having a class with me. So I thought this would be good to do. So keep this in mind. So this text by Master Nagarjuna, a commentary on the awakening mind, it begins with the verses, the root text, which is in the beginning of the text. It has been stated, devoid of all real entities and so forth. That verse comes from Guhya Samaja Tantra, the root Tantra of Guhya Samaja. And so, with regard to Guhya Samaja Tantra, Master Nagarjuna had practiced it and taught it. And he wrote the Pindavidhi, which is generation stage, text on generation stage of the Guhya Samaja. And then there is another text which is called Dose. And then Master Nagabodhi, who was a disciple of Master Nagarjuna, wrote the stages of presentation, or Namsharimba, and so which goes through, this text goes through the three transforming the three states into three kayas. And then with regard to the completion stage of Guhya Samaja, Master Nagarjuna has written the 5 stages. And then Master Arya Deva, who was a disciple of Master Nagarjuna, wrote, Arya Deva wrote, Judy and Chandrakirti wrote Dharamsala, the bright lamp. So these texts teach about Tantra in general and particularly the highest Yoga Tantra teaching. So these are great texts of wisdom, very important texts on Tantra. So with regard to Master Homage Tantra, Master Nagarjuna and his disciples have particularly focused on the Homage Tantra. So with regard to the text, the Bodhichitta Vivarana, I have received the reading transmission of it from the former Garden Tripa, Gyabji Rizong Rinpoche, who is sitting right to the right of His Holiness on the throne. So in Sanskrit, or the Indian language, the title is Bodhichitta Vivarana. Master Chandrakshita, because since during the time of the Tibetan Emperor Songtsen Gampo, Tibetans already devised our script, the written form of the language, and therefore when Master Chandrakshita came to Tibet in the 8th century, he advised the Tibetans to translate the Buddhist texts into Tibetan, our own language, and this, according to Master Chandrakshita's advice, and so at this advice, the Tibetans undertook the translation of the Indian texts, Buddhist texts, and there was a separate department of translation set up at the Samye monastery at that time in the 8th century. And so most of the classic or the great treatises of Buddhism were translated into Tibetan, and so the Tibetan our forebears also sincerely undertook or heeded Master Chandrakshita's advice, and there are many commentaries, sub-commentaries written on the Indian texts and the Buddha's words by Tibetan scholars. And so our ancestors for centuries have been preserved, promoted, administered the teaching of the Buddha in our land. In the past, we had very little contact with outside world, but since we became exiles, our contact with the wider world has become, quite wide. And so there are different texts on Buddhism in Chinese, English, Russian, French, German, Korean, and many other languages. So we have many books being published in different languages. And so at the advice of Master Chandrakshita, the great abbot, at his advice, we, the Tibetans, have preserved the scriptural and the experiential teaching of the Buddha. So this tradition that we have preserved so far is like a treasure of the whole world. And then particularly the Buddhist countries, and we, the people in these countries, we are the follower of the same teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni. And so, with regard to the teaching, We have the practice of the training of morality, training of single-point concentration, meditative concentration, and wisdom. And so these are basic to the teaching of the Buddha. And we have here the followers of the Pali tradition from Thailand, and who also practice the three trainings: morality, concentration, and wisdom. So as I said yesterday, with regard to the Sanskrit tradition that has come down from Nalanda Monastic University, there is emphasis on mainly focusing on the study of logic. And in China, as I mentioned yesterday also, the Xuanzang or Tangsan Lama brought Buddhism from India to China. But it seems that the Chinese Buddhist tradition has not focused much on logic and epistemology, whereas in Tibet we have done that. And there was the earlier and later dissemination of Buddhism in Tibet, and during the later dissemination, which also is called the Sarma tradition, the new translation school or tradition, there is emphasis, there's great and a wide practice or tradition of studying logic, and particularly Master Tsongkhapa studied in different traditions at that time, and then he founded the Ryugyedempa tradition. And so the entire Tibet, Yuzhang, Dotu, Dome, in all these areas of Tibet, the best study of logic and philosophy is within the Gelug tradition. And so the study of classic texts has become widely spread in Tibet. What else is there to say? And then the Indian texts, such as the words of the Buddha and the exegetical treatises written by Indians. So in all of these translations from Indian languages, we have the title given in Sanskrit, except for a few texts which were translated from Chinese, where the Chinese title is given. So in Tibetan, we have the teachings, the entire teaching of the Buddha, including the Tantra, so which were extant in Sanskrit and Pali as well. And so the title in Tibetan is Changju Semki Delpa. So here, the Bodhichitta, Changchu Sem, refers to, while the shared bodhicitta, which is taught in the Sutra and Tantrayanas, is set as the basis. As I explained yesterday, the word the Buddha uttered after his enlightenment, right after his enlightenment, where he said that he found the nectar like Dharma, which is profound, peaceful, free of fabrication, luminous and unconditioned, and so forth. So here, the bodhicitta does not refer to mainly that of the conventional bodhicitta, which is the mind focused on enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. But here, this bodhicitta refers to within the luminous mind, clear light mind, which has the degrees of subtlety. This refers to the subtlest, innate, spontaneously arisen clear light mind. because the gross states of mind do not become the, turn into the Buddha's mind as such. So at the end of the Bodhisattva path, the practitioners of Tantra go through the process of dissolution of the three visions of a whitish appearance and so forth, and then they actualize the spontaneous, innate, clear-light mind, which serves as the antidote to the final residue or the final, the last sort of defilement within the mind. And then after overcoming them, the person becomes fully enlightened, a Buddha. And so the ultimate clear-light mind, which is focused or absorbed in emptiness directly, that serves as the antidote. So that is what is referred by the Changchup Sem or the Bodhichitta here. So because it's a commentary on that kind of clear light mind, it is called the commentary. And then there's a homage to glorious Vajrasattva. Vajrasattva also referring to Vajradhara. So within the teaching of the Buddha, there are those teachings which the Buddha gave and in the form of a monk, and also arising in the as manifestation of deities with concerts, taking the desire into the path. And so through that practice, the gross states of mind and the energies are stopped. And then the clear light, the innate clear light mind is manifested or actualized. So, of course, at the time of death, ordinarily also we do go through this process of the clear light mind becoming manifest, but after the third dissolution of the near attainment, in which the earlier part, during the earlier part there is some memory, but in the latter part there is no memory whatever. And then the clear light mind manifests at the time of death for ordinary persons, but that doesn't serve as a path yet. But through the practice, meditators, what they do is they are able to manifest or actualize this clear light within the heart chakra. So here the traditional texts refer to Nyingka, which means at the heart, but I don't think this is talking about the physical heart as such, but at the heart chakra, at the center of which, in the central channel, the two bodhicittas, or the drops, red and white drops, gather, and then so at the time of conception, for example, the two subtle drops gather at the heart, and from there it spreads to the other parts of the body. And then there is the 80 conceptions and so forth. And then at the time of dissolution, at the time when we die, there is this dissolution process of the elements, the water, earth, water, fire, and so forth. And then, through the power of the meditation of the meditator, they're able to actually stop the flow of these 80 conceptions, or the whitish increase, and so forth. And so, during their lifetime, they would be able to practice where they could bring up or actualize this clear light, innate clear light mind, and as a because of the influence of their meditation throughout their life, at the time of death, they are able to actually go through this process while dying, so that they go through the dissolution of the elements, and then the whitish appearance, reddish increase, and the blackish near attainment, even at the later part, where ordinary people are not able to remember, have no memory, but they can still sustain their memory and actualize the clear light. And it's like just as during the time of sleep, it is said that when you are able to actually turn sleep into virtuous practice. So it's Judge Rizal Rinpoche was offered some tea, but before he took it, one of the attendants came and took it away. So they're going to bring a hot tea for him. And so there are four mental factors, as it's called, which are said to be variables, variable mental factors. One of them is sleep. So So a meditator who is able to sustain this kind of meditation can also make the clear light mind actualize to at the time when they go through the sleep process as well, and then they can actualize this clear light mind, which can focus on emptiness as well. So even at the basic level, this can happen, and then during the while the person practitioner is on the path, they can go through this process and develop single-pointed concentration, especially during the subtle generation stage. Like the person, the meditator, can remain in single-pointed concentration for a day. And then there are different points in the body which are emphasized in different tantras. For example, in the Kala Chakra Tantra, the empty body is focused or at the mid-eyebrow, and in other tantras, there's focus on meditation whereby the meditator focuses at the heart chakra and so forth. And so during this process, they are able to go through the dissolution process and actualize the ultimate or the final subjective clear light mind. So that's innermost subtle mind, which if you can actually develop it into a path realizing emptiness, then it can serve as the antidote to the subtlest obscuration of knowledge. Therefore, Master Gunken Jayang Sheba says, though both the Tantra and Sutra and Tantra teach about the main defilement, but the Tantra shows the most supreme means or the antidote to that. Although both teach emptiness, the subjective mind, which serves as a clear an antidote, is taught in the Tantra. And so this is the subtlest, innermost subtle mind, which is developed or which arises as a mind or consciousness realizing emptiness, and then serve as an antidote to the subtlest, defilement. So at the end of the Bodhisattva path, the Bodhisattva develops this final antidote, and the luminous mind, which realizes emptiness, which serves as antidote to the subtlest, the final defilement. And then at the second moment, after that, the person becomes fully enlightened. And then there is a homage by the translator. And then next comes the verse, the lines from Samajja Tantra. It has been stated, devoid of all real entities, utterly discarding all objects and subjects, such as aggregates, elements, and sense fields. Due to the sameness of selflessness of all phenomena, one's mind is primarily unborn. It is in the nature of emptiness. And so, devoid of all entities refers to for example, the non-Buddhist tradition asserts a self which is single, permanent, and autonomous. So whatever they assert, or whatever we assert as having some kind of an objective existence, cannot be held when you are argued through reason, and therefore this devoid of all entities means that. And utterly discarding all objects. Aggregates, such as aggregates, elements, and sense fields. So when you actually assert that there is a self which lacks the characteristics of the aggregates, which means the aggregates are impermanent, changing, but the self is unchanging, then that is the view of the non-Buddhist tradition, asserting a self which is single, permanent, and autonomous. Whereas even amongst the Buddhist tradition, philosophical schools, there are those who could still assert a self which has the same characteristics as the aggregates. And so the aggregates and so forth are the basis for the designation of a person. So at the Bodhisattva, when they reach the seventh Bodhisattva ground, it is said that they become more superior through that of intelligence than the Shravakas or the Shravaka Arhats and Pratyeka Buddha Arhats. So which shows that even the Shravakas, the Arhats and Arya beings within the Shravaka tradition do realize emptiness. So as long as there is grasping or clinging at some kind of an objective existence in the aggregate, to that extent one cannot realize emptiness fully, as I explained yesterday too. So the aggregates, elements, and sense fields, which are the basis of a designation of a persons, do not exist the way they appear to us. In the Pali tradition too, or the Sanskrit tradition, there's the explanation of objects of knowledge and the knowledge as the subjective mind, which understands them or cognizes them. And then there's a presentation of the 5 aggregates, the 12 sense fields, and so forth. Whereas the lower schools of tenet do assert some form of objective existence. So the self or Atman designated or asserted by the non-Buddhist traditions has no basis, and therefore the text is devoid of all real entities. The Buddha also teaches that the form is like a bubble and so forth. Due to the sameness of selflessness of all phenomena means that nothing whatever, all the appearing things do not have any essential nature or existence. So these gross or subtle states of mind cannot have any essential existence. If you take the instance of a mind, a moment of a mind, we can talk about the future, present, future, and past. So even in the case of what we call present moment of mind, half of it's gone, past, and half yet to come. And so you can actually understand this if you think through. So just as the matter, also when you break it up into the past and the different moments, you cannot actually pinpoint as something as being this or that. Half of the present moment is gone and half is yet to arise. Similarly, with regard to the mind or mind stream, which is posited on a series of moments of mind. So mind or consciousness is said to be a mere experience. So just as matter we cannot pinpoint point our finger at anything being a matter when you actually divide it or dissect it into the moments. Likewise, the mind cannot be found. And one's mind is primarily unborn. It is in the nature of emptiness, means that the objects of our mind do not have any essential existence. Likewise, the mind, the subjective experience, cannot have any essential existence. And the innate clear-light mind, according to the Goya Samaja Tantra, there are the 4 empty states mentioned. So here, emptiness does not refer to the lack of independent existence, but it refers to the absence of the adventitious states of mind, or the cursor states of mind. So Shen Tong, philosophical view of the Jonangpas, could also make sense if you interpret in this way. So there is the first empty state, the second, third, fourth empty states. And so these four empty states refers to being empty of the appearance, the whitish appearance, and the reddish increase, and so forth. And at the end, there is all empty state at the dissolution of after the dissolution of the near attainment. And so in the Shentong's school, there is mention of things. The clear light mind is referred to. I mean, there is this presentation or explanation of the completion stage with of the ultimate clear light mind. And then there is there are the completion stage, and there's the within which there's the ultimate completion stage, and then the conventional ones. So the ultimate refers to the clear light, innate clear light mind, and then the conventional completion stage refers to that of the illusory body, and so these two are brought together in union. So in the Chonang tradition, they do explain about the conventional being, the conventional things being devoid of self nature, and then the ultimate existence, ultimate reality or truth being devoid of conventional things. So when you explain emptiness in that state, there could be some logical fallacies. So the subject matter of this text is the ultimate clear light mind. With regard to emptiness, which is taught, which is a shared teaching of Bodhisattva and Tantra. So a mind which is freed from that of those are the defilements, the afflictive mental afflictions, is of course a very special state of mind, but still the arhats of the Shravaka Dhyana have not overcome the subtle defilement of the cognitive obscurations. And so for that to happen, one should actually have Bodhichitta, which is combined with that of the ultimate, clear light. And so the first passage, a paragraph after the verse, just as the Buddhas and so forth, through to those who have not thoroughly transcended sorrow, is read. So in order that I may save those who are not saved, free those who are not free, relieve those who are not relieved, and help thoroughly transcend sorrow, those who have not thoroughly sorrow, refers to overcoming the suffering of suffering, changeable suffering, and so forth. And finally, overcoming and reaching that state of enlightenment. Have you taken your tea? Or do you have? As I said yesterday, the view of emptiness and cherishing others over oneself are really great things, which gives you true peace of mind, and also which combats the unruly mind that we have directly. So, with regard to altruism, thinking of caring for others' well-being is really helpful in one's own peace of mind. And then with regard to emptiness, of course, even in quantum physics, the idea that things have no objective existence is helpful in helping subside your negative emotions based on the appearance of things as if they have some objective existence. And so when you think along these lines, it's really going to be helpful to others if you are able to explain it to them. So to the best of one's ability, what this text says is that you have to serve others. Those bodhisattvas who practice by means of the secret mantra after having generated awakening mind in terms of its conventional aspect in the form of an aspiration must then produce the ultimate awakening mind through the force of meditative practice. I shall therefore explain its nature. So Master Nagarjuna then writes this verse of homage. Bowing to the glorious Vajra holder who embodies the awakening mind, I shall explain here the meditative practice of the awakening mind that destroys cyclic existence. So because this text teaches the profound teaching found in the highest yoga Tantra, this verse, the homage is given to Vajra holder. The Buddhas maintain the awakening mind to be not obscured by such conceptions as consciousness of self, aggregates, and so on. It is always characterized by emptiness. So by using the clear light mind to meditate on emptiness, so during the process, in the process of developing this mind, clear light mind, one can meditate on emptiness using the understanding of the philosophical tradition of Chitta Matras. But as the mind becomes subtler and subtler, then when a meditator reaches that of the isolation of mind, it is said that even a Chittamatra philosopher kind of transforms or into a Madhyamaka philosopher at that point. So the self, the aggregates, and so on. So of course, within the Buddhist tradition, there are those who do assert a form of self which is has the same characteristics as the aggregates. For example, the Chittamatras do assert a self from within the mind. So when a person is fully absorbed in emptiness, because there is nothing that they can actually say that there is a person there, therefore the within the sixth mind, then they go to assert that there is an alaya vijnana, or the fundamental consciousness. So the Chittamatas following scripture do assert such being. On the basis of that alaya vijnana. And then when we study Abhisamaya Alamkara in its commentaries, the Savatantrika Madhyamakas also are said to assert a self, which is the sixth mind. But Master Chandrakirti says that when you analyze, investigate into the things or self through the sevenfold reasoning and so forth, like the chariot, nothing could be pinpointed as being this or that. But then a self and chariots do exist by way of convention, by way of designation. Through the renown of the worldly conventions. And so they're not saying that things do not exist at all. But for example, if I talk about having pain in my hand, of course the pain is there, but when you actually try to look for the pain and search for it within the hand, of course you cannot find anything that you can point your finger at as being the pain. And so similarly it is the case with anything. Like the table in front of me, the hand in my hand, etc., cannot be found at all when you search for their identity. And therefore Master Nagarjuna says, what is dependent through what originates through dependence is said to be empty, and that is said to be designated, and that is a middle way. And there is no phenomena which is not dependent, and therefore there is no phenomena which is not empty. And so what this means is that things do not exist the way they appear to us. So what this means is that in the Heart Sutra there is the mention of all the five aggregates too should be seen as being empty of inherent existence or nature. And so what that means is that things cannot be found when you search for their identity within them, and therefore form is empty. Form cannot be found when you search for it in its identity within it. And emptiness is form, because form can be designated on the basis of its dependence on other factors. And therefore it's not non-existent, but because the form does exist by way of worldly convention, therefore emptiness is form, and emptiness is not other than emptiness, form, and form too is not other than emptiness, which these two phrases refer to the fact that the emptiness and form, emptiness of the form and form itself are conceptually distinct, but by nature in the same. So we all do recite the Heart Sutra. So the five aggregates also are without any self-existence. And form is empty, emptiness is form is not other than emptiness is not other than form too is not other than emptiness. And so this, from form is empty to through to empty, form too is not other than emptiness, we refer to this as the fourfold emptiness. And then later in the Heart Sutra, it is mentioned that the Buddhas of the three times too become enlightened, fully enlightened, based on this understanding. So how do we become a Buddha is shown or taught by this mantra that yatha gati gati paragati parasangati bodhiswaha. That yatha means it is like this. And gati, first gati refers to the path of accumulation, second gati refers to the path of application, and the paragati refers to the path of seeing emptiness directly, and then parasangati refers to the path of meditation, and bodhis refers to enlightenment. And so you go through this progression along the path and become enlightened. So this is attained when you train your mind to combat this ignorance, clinging to true existence in things and self. And thereby, as your clinging to this becomes, decreases, you go through the path of accumulation and so forth. Sakya Mare. In Kyormulung, in Tibet or somewhere. Sakya is. In any case, we're not sure about the place, but Tsongkhapa was in the prayer assembly, and during the recitation of the Heart Sutra, he was meditating on emptiness, and he was able to stay focused. And when the prayer was finished, he was still sitting there in meditation, and therefore that the pillar next to which he was sitting was called the pillar of concentration. So when you are able to develop this insight into emptiness, helped by the single-pointed concentration and develop this penetrative or the special insight, then you enter into the path of preparation, from the path of preparation or application, from the path of accumulation. And when you realize emptiness directly, you reach the path of seeing. And then when the next part of meditation, where you acquaint yourself with that direct experience of emptiness, and then when with the help of that wisdom realizing emptiness directly, you go through the Bodhisattva grounds. And when you reach the path of, path of the seventh ground of bodhisattvas, you do away with all the negative emotions. And then from the eighth ground on to the eighth ground, and then from the eighth to the 10th ground, then you actually go through the process of overcoming the cognitive obscuration as well. And so for these, and then finally you become enlightened. So for these, the whole thing to happen, first you need to listen to the teachings, and then having heard the teaching and studied it, you should reflect on it, so that you feel convinced that things do not exist the way they appear to us. Whereas the Savatantrika Madhyamakas down, they do assert some objectiveness in the things, whereas the Prasangika Madhyamakas do not assert anything as having any objective existence at all. And so, with the appearance, the cognition of appearance does away with the extreme of existence, and then that of the realization of emptiness does away with the extreme of nihilism. So when you are asleep, you do dream, and in the dream you see horses and so forth. But when you wake up from the dream, all these things that appear has no existence. So similarly, things do appear as if they have some kind of objective independent existence. But It is, they do not exist the way they appear to us, and therefore you have to know that how things appear to you as if they have some kind of objective existence is that object of negation, which you should confirm. And it is very important to understand that in the meditation on emptiness. This is what the seventh Dalai Lama has said. And so, having listened to the teaching and having heard the teaching on emptiness, you should reflect, think over and over again. And I also use in this meditation on emptiness the concept of what the quantum physicists also say, that I do not have the single-pointed concentration yet, but otherwise I aspire to reach that of the path of application or preparation. And so Master Tsongkhapa mentions the getting rid of this extreme view of permanence and getting rid through the appearance, and then getting rid of nihilism through the insight into emptiness. So of course, my brain and your brain are same. If some neuroscientists were to check, but Master Nagarjuna, of course, used his brain to analyze the teaching of the Buddha and meditated on it and reflected on it, and then he actually developed the experience of emptiness, and therefore from his experience he wrote the fundamental wisdom verses of the middle way. And to this text there are commentaries written by Buddha Palita and also by Master Chandra Kirti, and then and also Prasanapada, clear words. And Rinpoche Tsongkhapa wrote 5 great texts pertaining to this view of emptiness, the Madhyamaka philosophy, which are the great insight section of the great treatise of the stages of the path of enlightenment, and then and so forth. So Tsongkhapa mentions that the way things can exist could be two: either that they could exist by way of objectively, or they could exist by way of dependence on others. And since they cannot exist objectively, they must exist by designation, and therefore one should direct one's mind, steer it towards that. So if you use the reasoning, the five-pronged reasoning and the 7-pronged reasoning and so forth to gain insight into emptiness, this statement by Master Tsongkhapa saying that you should steer your mind towards that is, in a sense, a kind of a desperation, an expression of his desperation, almost like swearing. So in any case, if you really contemplate these teachings on emptiness, you'll be able to see that so far in this samsaric existence, since time beginningless, we have become more or less servant of this grasping at some true existence. Whereas once you realize through these teachings, studying them, reflecting them on the you will be able to actually turn the ground up and eradicate this clinging. You may feel like that. So when you study the Four Noble Truths, for example, it is you're going to really understand and gain insight or some kind of a conviction that the true cessation is possible, because ignorance, which grasps at the true independent existence in things, is totally distorted, a misconception which can be overcome through this understanding of emptiness. And then you'll be able to see that liberation and enlightenment are possible to attain. So the Chittamatras, the mind-only school, they do assert that mind or consciousness is real, whereas they reject any external existence of things. It is with mind moistened by compassion. So His Holiness just jumped to verse number 11 and then 12, 13 and down. So there, in the philosophical traditions, there is mention of the sense consciousnesses, like the visual perception arising with the aspect of the object and without the aspect of objects and so forth. So on this verse number 16, it says, neither atom or form exists, nor is the sense organ elsewhere. Even more, no sense organ as agent exists. So the producer and the produced are utterly unsuited for production. (17) Verse number 17 on page 20 in the book. So when you perceive something, an object, I mean, some people say that it's good, some others say it's bad. So there are different perceptions according to individuals. So there are different ways of perceiving the objects. Verse number 19 and then 20. With respect to the same female body, the three different notions are entertained by the ascetic, the lustful, and the wild dog, as a corpse, an object of lust or food. It's the sameness of the object that functions, if asserted. Is this not like being harmed in a dream? Between the dream and wakeful state, there is no difference insofar as the functioning of things is concerned. In terms of object and subject, whatever, so Vesta 22 refers to, is an argument against the Chittamatras. In terms of object and subject, whatever appears to the consciousness, apart from the cognition themselves, no external objects exist anywhere. So this is how the Chittamatras assert things to have no external existence, but that mind is real. And they say that whatever appears to our mind, these things, the objects, are mere reflection of the imprints left on the mind. And so the objects and the subjective mind are not different in nature, because the objects are the reflections of the mind, subjective mind itself, because they appear or they arise on the basis of the imprints on the mind. So there is no external object at all existing in the mode of entities. The very perception of individual consciousness arises as appearance of form. Just as a person whose mind is deluded sees magical illusions and mirages and the cities of Gandharva spirits, so too forms and so on are perceived. To overcome grasping at selfhood, the Buddha taught aggregates, elements and so on, by abiding in the states of mind only. The beings of great fortune even renounce that teaching. So the reference of this state of mind only is in the sutra, where it mentions the three planes of existence are mind only. For those who propound consciousness only, this manifold world is established as mind only. What might be the nature of that consciousness? I shall now explain this very point. And so the Chittamatras reject any external existence, whereas the mind is truly existent. All of this is but one's mind. That which was stated by the Able One is to alleviate the fear of childish. It is not a statement of a final truth. The imputed, the dependent, the consummate, they have only one nature in their own emptiness. And identities are constructed upon the mind. To those who delight in the great vehicle, the Buddha taught in brief selflessness and perfect equanimity, and that the mind is primarily unborn. The proponents of yogic practice assert that the purified mind is affected through mastery of one's own mind, and through utter revolution of its state is the sphere of its own reflexive nature. That which is past is no more. That which is yet to be is not obtained. As it abides in locus, its locus is utterly transformed. So how can there be such awareness as present in the present? Whatever it is, it's not what it appears. What it appears as. Whatever it appears as, it is not. Appears as it is not so. Consciousness is devoid of selfhood, yet consciousness has no other basis. By being close to the lodestone, an iron object swiftly moves forward. It possesses no minds of its own, yet it appears as if it does, and so forth. Goddess. We're on 36. So if it is considered that without a body there is no consciousness, you must explain it is this awareness that the object of one's own specific knowledge. By calling it specific awareness of itself, you are asserting it to be an entity. And having ascertained oneself and to help others ascertain, the learned proceeds excellently, always without error. So in order to help others, you need to give guidance and counsel to others. But without your knowledge of what you are going to tell others, there's no way you can help others. And therefore, in order to help others who are of varieties of mental disposition, you need to understand the different types of things, different teachings. The cognizer perceives the cognizable. Without the cognizable, there is no cognition. Therefore, why do you admit that neither object nor subject exists at all? The mind is but a mere name. Apart from its name, it exists as nothing. So all objects, everything is merely a name. So they are merely conventionally known. So view consciousness as a mere name. Name too has no intrinsic nature, neither within or likewise without, or somewhere in between the two. The conquerors have never found the mind, so the mind has the nature of an illusion. The distinction of colors, shapes, or that of object and subject, of female, male, female, neuter, the mind has not such fixed forms. In brief, the Buddhas have never seen, nor will they ever see such a mind. So how can they see it as intrinsic nature, that which is devoid of intrinsic nature? Entity is a conceptualization. Absence of conceptualization, emptiness. Where conceptualization occurs, how can there be emptiness? The mind in terms of perceived and perceiver. This the Tathagatas have never seen. Where there is the perceived and the perceiver, there is no enlightenment. So devoid of characteristics and origination, devoid of substantive reality and transcending mind, space. Awakening mind and enlightenment possess the characteristics of non-duality. So with regards to Chunyi or Dharmata, space, the space, it could be understood in terms of emptiness as well as the empty state that I explained earlier, with regard to the mind, the subtle innate innermost mind. So you cannot just, as I received the transmission of the 7 treasuries of Longchen Rabjampa from Tushi Rinpoche, the late Tushi Rinpoche, and as a commitment he gave me, I read the Chuying Zu, and so every day. So in there, the space is understood not in terms of emptiness, but the subjective clear light, luminous, the innate mind. So in the Dzogchen and Mahamudra teachings of Gagyu and Nyingma traditions, they mostly focus on the clear light subjective mind as being. And so from the in the Gagyu tradition, since the Guampo past time, there is this confluence of the Gadam and the Mahamudra tradition. So they focus mainly on this clear light mind when they refer to space or Dharmadhatu. Those abiding in the heart of enlightenment, such as Buddhas and so forth. So devoid of characteristics and origination and so forth. Devoid of characteristics and so forth, the argument against the Chittamatra philosophical assertions and others. Those abiding in the heart of enlightenment, such as the Buddhas, the great beings, and all the great compassionate ones, always understand emptiness to be like space. Therefore, constantly meditate on this emptiness, the basis of all phenomena, tranquil and illusion-like, groundless in the destroyer of cyclic existence, as non-origination and as emptiness, or as no self, grasping at emptiness as such. He who meditates on a lesser truth, that is not true meditation. The notions of virtue and non-virtual, characterized by being momentary and disintegrated. The Buddha has spoken of this their emptiness. Other than this, no emptiness is held. 53. 54. And 55 down shows the Madhyamaka position. From the very beginning itself, the mind has never had any intrinsic nature, and so forth. 57. 58. So emptiness means that things are dependently originated, and it doesn't mean nothingness. So starting with ignorance and ending with aging. So I'll stop here at the 59, verse number 59, end of it. So emptiness is not, the view of emptiness is not a nihilistic view, but the things are dependently originated, what is understood by emptiness. Please ask your questions now. We'll have question and answer session. Raise your hands. Jimba. There, Deminde. Tanji, Kandu Dindu. Ja, det är själv. Du är själv, du är själv. Jimba, du är själv. Jag agree.
I think those people who have question and come one side instead of Melbourne carry here and there. No, Melbourne one person hold the Melbourne, then those questioner come here.
Tua shua dungeya. Let him go in. Jimba. Let him go in up to His Holiness. Clear light. Jimba. Mic check pageto.
Vị Thế Tâm và Vô Tâm khác nhau như thế nào ạ? Và nếu con niệm Phật thì có thể có
Cái dùng cái đồng rồi à?
Con xin đọc lại câu hỏi là vị Thế Tâm và Vô Tâm thì khác nhau như thế nào ạ? Và nếu con niệm Phật không thì có thể có được vị Thế Tâm không hay là chỉ qua được cách thiền định ạ?
Thế dùng rồi à? Jimba. Jimba. 콘서 대화 먼저 과야 말이 비기디 마이크를 줄줄. So with regard to mind or consciousness, we have the 5 sensorial perceptions which are related or to the external objects, form and so forth. In Western psychology, they mainly deal with the sensorial perceptions. But when we talk about anger, attachment, and so forth, they don't have to do anything with the sensorial perception, but they have to do with mind. When you're asleep and dream, there's no sense perception, but there is still the mental experience of the dream. So the sense perceptions arise when they meet with their particular object, whereas when you are asleep, these sense perceptions do not function. So within the mind, there are different degrees of subtlety. So I have some people who have some experience of meditation when they are single-pointedly focused, when they stay single-pointedly focused on one object, they are able to sustain it. Just merely seeing the experience of clarity and awareness. So from one's experience through meditation, one could talk about the subtlety, the degrees of subtlety within the mind. So of course there is benefit. As I quoted the Buddha yesterday, where the Buddha says, I have shown you the path to liberation, but liberation is in your hands. And then I also quoted these lines which says, this verse which says, the sages do not wash away the sins of beings, nor do they remove their suffering with their hands, nor do they transfer their own realization, but only by showing the truth and the reality do they lead other beings to liberation. And so what you need to think about is the nature of the mind, being luminous and awareness. So through one's training of the mind, meditation, sustained meditation, one will be able to overcome all the defilements of the mind, and not just by paying homage or to the Buddha.
When the meditation uses space and go to be the enlightenment, so please explain how to meditation with the space.
Space.
Space. It's not empty.
Space, chewing, he uses space for chewing. So whatever objects there are, you need to see that they have their own homogeneous cause, or a cause which is similar in type to the result. So for example, in the beginning, there is just empty space. And then when the formation of the universe began, you have to go up. So within the cause, there are those what are called the substantial cause, the fundamental material. So in any thing outside, you should have that substantial cause for something to arise. Likewise, in the case of the mind, the consciousness, it should have its own substantial cause. So otherwise, without a cause, or a cause which is not compatible to the mind, it should be asserted, which are not logical. So with regard to our mental consciousness, for example, right now, we can actually see there are degrees of subtlety within the mental consciousness. And then through one's meditation and focused meditation, if you sustain it, persevere in your meditation, there could be a possibility of actualizing the subtle clear-light mind, which must happen by clearing away those of the defilements which cover the subtle mind. Yeah.
Con có một câu hỏi là theo con hiểu là thầy ngài giảng thì mọi sự mọi vật mà tạo bởi các ngũ uẩn là đều có cái tánh không là giả có. Thì con muốn hỏi là những cái gì là nó là thật có, hay làm sao mà con có thể biết cái thật có?
Everything is empty without any intrinsic. But some people think that there's still something. Sometimes it is said that things do not exist. Sometimes things exist, sometimes it is said things don't exist. When is it that they exist? When is it that they do not exist? So as I explained the fourfold emptiness from the Heart Sutra, you have to talk about emptiness, because emptiness is an attribute or characteristic of something, and therefore you must have a basis, an object of which you can talk about its emptiness. So without that basis, for example the form, you cannot talk about the form being empty. And so I said the emptiness of form and form are of essentially the same nature, but conceptually different. So therefore, each and everything has two natures, which are this conventional and the ultimate nature, which is shared with, between the Sutrayana and Tantrayana.
While we speak on emptiness, we would like to think that compassion is at the heart of emptiness. Then do we believe that compassion exists? How to understand this paradox? Or is it that compassion is the fabric of emptiness and that only compassion exists, that is, love exists, and emptiness is nothing but full of love energy?
Very exotic question. So when you talk about emptiness, what you're actually doing is investigating into the nature of things. And when you realize emptiness, there's just that empty absence of essential existence of anything. And therefore, things do not exist independently, truly, which means that things exist by way of dependence on others, conditions. So there's no self-sufficiency in anything because they are dependent on other factors. That's why they lack any essential nature.
You were saying about vacuity and that vacuity should be space, and that we should meditate about space. But who meditates? If conscience is time, you are comparing in this text, Arjuna, we're comparing time with conscience. Then meditating is something like time acting into the space? The text compares vacuity to space. And it says that we should meditate about space. But who meditates? The conscience is compared to time, and time doesn't really exist. So, meditation, is it time acting into space?
So when we say that things cannot be found, we don't say they don't exist, but when you actually search for the identity of things, you cannot find anything that you can pinpoint as being this and that. As Domdeva has said, of course the fire and hands both are empty of any intrinsic existence, but if you put your hand in the fire, it'll naturally burn. Just by saying that they are empty, it doesn't mean that your hand will not burn when you put your hand in the fire. And if you hit your hand on the table, of course it hurts. But when you actually search for the identity of the hand or the table, you cannot find anything as being this or that. So that is what is actually meant by emptiness. Of course, the shape, color, and so forth of the table are its parts, the table's parts. And then you have the whole called table, which actually includes all the parts, color, and so forth. So if you try to search for the identity of the table within its color, the shape, the parts, and so forth, you cannot find anything as being that table. But conventionally, in worldly convention, we still can talk about a table in front of us. So that means that when you actually look for how things exist, the way things exist, and you look, you cannot actually find anything as being the table or any other thing. But conventionally, the table and other things still exist, and therefore we talk about the two truths, the conventional and the ultimate. And therefore the book, the Heart Sutra says form is empty and so forth.
What that is and how to recognize that within one's experience.
So with regard to the exaggerated outlook or inappropriate mentation, in quantum physics, they say that if you were to actually hold the things to have existence the way they appear to you, you cannot find, because when you actually look for things, you are actually trying to find what appears to you, but that's not what you can find. Whereas actions, agents, and objects do exist when you don't do any analysis into the ultimate nature. So when we say the things appear, but the way they exist is not the way they appear to us. And so when you understand emptiness correctly, you can understand that things are dependently originated, dependently arisen. And that is the profound view of the middle way.
Người nào nhập định thiền tâm Bồ Đề, dù chỉ chốc lát tối công đức ấy, ngay đến chư Phật cũng không đo nổi. Con xin hỏi là làm sao để tập được tâm Bồ Đề? Con kính
How do we train our mind on a daily basis in Bodhichitta? How do we train our mind in Bodhichitta on a daily basis? So, when we hear something like news or watch news on television, we can see there are lots of troubles and problems in the world. All want happiness but not suffering. Despite that, they are devoid of happiness but overcome with suffering, inflicted by suffering. So if you could reflect on the fact that the other sentient beings are same, like myself, wanting happiness and not wanting suffering, but not only at the superficial level to overcome just the immediate suffering or pain, but to actually look into the cause of suffering, and knowing the cause, what are the antidote of the cause of suffering. So in other words, the suffering is not, if you ask, is suffering something that you cannot actually change? That's not the case. Because you can overcome or change suffering. And how can you do that? You need to find the means to overcome the suffering. And therefore, understanding that there's a means to overcome suffering, then you should actually feel sentient beings dear in your heart. If they could, thinking that if they could overcome or be free from suffering. So with that kind of broad understanding of suffering, even if you think of overcoming one suffering of one person, of course all religious traditions teach about compassion and love. So these teachings do direct you towards bodhicitta. So these sentient beings who are suffering, you should think of leading them to that state which is free from all suffering. And for that reason, you should think of attaining complete enlightenment for the benefit of sentient beings, and therefore generate or cultivate bodhicitta.
See you again tomorrow.
No.